He's the oldest human specimen we have that is so complete, so well preserved, with all the scientific disciplines that are intrigued by him, that want answers. He may well be the most studied human being in history.
When scientists unearthed a prehistoric human frozen in ice, they were shocked to find the body still clutching an unusual object. What this artifact reveals about the past could potentially change history as we know it. 1. Ötzi the Iceman. Ötzi the Iceman is one of the most famous and well-preserved mummies ever discovered, and he's a real-time capsule of a life lived over 5,000 years ago. Found in 1991 by two hikers in the Alps on the border between Austria and Italy, Ötzi was an ancient mystery wrapped in layers of ice, and every little detail about him is more fascinating than the last. First off, Ötzi was about 45 years old when he died, which was pretty old for his time. He lived around 3,300 BCE during the Copper Age, an era just before the full Bronze Age kicked off. When Ötzi was found, his body was frozen solid, preserved in remarkable detail. His skin, bones, and even his last meal were intact. This gave scientists the unique opportunity to study him like never before. He had a surprisingly modern toolkit on him, tools like a copper axe, a flint knife, and a bow with arrows, which were top of the line for the time. What's even more interesting here is the fact that the axe was made of copper, not bronze, indicating Ötzi might have been a part of the transition period between the Stone and Bronze Ages. But arguably the most gripping part of his story is how he met his end. After years of research, it turns out Ötzi didn't just freeze in the Alps, he was likely murdered. A detailed study of his body revealed an arrowhead embedded in his back, suggesting he was shot by someone, possibly during a violent confrontation. Researchers also discovered wounds on his hands, indicating he was involved in some sort of fight just before his death. And the plot thickens. Ötzi's stomach contents revealed he ate his last meal just hours before he died, which included meat from a goat and plants, hinting that he may have been traveling at the time, perhaps even running for his life. Beyond the gruesome aspects of his death, Ötzi brings us face to face with the everyday life of a prehistoric man. Scientists have analyzed his clothes, which were made of materials like leather, grasses, and fur, showing that even in the harsh environment of the Alps, Ötzi was prepared. He had a pair of shoes, a cloak, and a hat, all made to keep him warm and dry. But it wasn't just about survival. His tattoos also hold a mystery. Ötzi had 61 tattoos, mostly lines and crosses, placed on areas of his body that seemed to correspond with acupressure points. Was he using ancient forms of medicine, or was this just cultural? It remains unclear, but it certainly gives insight into what was important to him, both physically and spiritually. Every time researchers dig deeper into Ötzi's past, they find more clues, making him one of the most fascinating figures from prehistory. He's not just a frozen body. He's an entire story in ice, and each new discovery brings us closer to understanding the world he lived in. The more we learn, the clearer it becomes. Ötzi's story is far from over. Want to learn more about Ötzi and other discoveries like him? Like this video and subscribe to our channel for more videos just like this. We've got a lot more where that came from. 2. The Siberian Woolly Mammoth. The Siberian woolly mammoth is an iconic symbol of the Ice Age, and its discovery is a great example of how the past can literally come back to life. In 2007, a team of scientists in Siberia made one of the most incredible finds in recent history: the carcass of a fully preserved woolly mammoth. Discovered in the Siberian permafrost, the mammoth's body had been frozen for over 39,000 years. The conditions in Siberia's ice were so perfect that the mammoth's flesh, fur, and even its trunk were still intact. This particular mammoth, named Yuka, was found in a remarkably preserved state. Standing at nearly 10 feet tall and weighing around 6 tons during its lifetime, Yuka was a majestic creature. Its fur was still visible, and large chunks of its body remained intact, allowing scientists to conduct extensive research. The team even uncovered a fascinating discovery: Yuka's stomach contents, which contained undigested plants, suggesting it died after consuming food, possibly from a sudden illness or injury. The sight of this frozen giant was a stunning reminder of how these creatures once dominated the land, with their massive tusks reaching lengths of up to 16 feet and their thick, shaggy coats making them perfectly suited for the icy landscapes they roamed. But it doesn't stop there. In addition to Yucca, numerous other woolly mammoths have been found in the Siberian permafrost, each offering new insights into the behavior, diet, and extinction of these magnificent creatures. One of the more fascinating aspects of these discoveries is how they have opened up the door to possibilities like de-extinction. Thanks to the preservation of mammoth DNA in these frozen carcasses, some scientists are even exploring the idea of cloning woolly mammoths to revive them. Though this remains a long shot, the fact that we have access to such well-preserved specimens has given researchers new opportunities to study genetics and even consider the possibility of bringing these ancient giants back into the world. 3. The Franklin Expedition Bodies. In the mid-19th century, British explorer Sir John Franklin set off with 2 ships, HMS Erebus and HMS Terror, to chart the elusive Northwest Passage, an Arctic sea route that remained a dream for explorers of the time. Franklin and his crew never returned, and for over 150 years, the fate of the expedition was left in the dark. In 1845, Franklin's ship set sail, carrying a crew of 129 men, including officers, sailors, and scientists. But shortly after leaving England, the expedition ran into trouble. As the ships entered the icebound waters of the Canadian Arctic, they became trapped. Despite their best efforts, the ships were unable to escape, and the crew was stranded in the unforgiving frozen landscape. Over the years, many rescue missions were launched, but it wasn't until 2014 that a breakthrough occurred. The discovery of HMS Erebus in 2014 and HMS Terror in 2016, both found relatively intact beneath the icy waters of the Canadian Arctic. These discoveries were monumental, confirming that the ships had been lost in a known area, but giving little insight into what had really happened to the crew. What happened to them after they became trapped? Why had no survivors been found? To answer these questions, researchers turned their attention to the remains of the crew members themselves. In 1984, some of the first physical evidence of the Franklin expedition's tragic end came in the form of skeletal remains discovered on King William Island, not far from where the ships were found. These remains, alongside clues like discarded personal items and a makeshift campsite, indicated that the men had attempted to trek overland in search of rescue. But it was the discovery of other bodies decades later, found in specific positions and showing signs of unusual damage, that really pointed to the horrifying final chapters of the expedition. Many of the bodies showed signs of malnutrition, with bones that suggested severe weight loss, likely caused by the crew being trapped for an extended period without enough food. But more chilling were the marks on some of the bones, indications of cannibalism. Analysis revealed that in their desperate final days, some crew members resorted to eating the bodies of their fellow sailors to survive. In addition to the physical evidence, detailed studies of the bodies found in the 21st century provided insight into the types of injuries the men had suffered. One find came in the form of a body found with an iron spike embedded in it. This discovery also pointed to the harsh conditions the men faced, from scurvy to frostbite, and possibly the onset of lead poisoning, which many believe came from the expedition's tin cans, which may have been leaching lead into their food supply. Despite all their efforts, they passed away, only to be found over a century later, frozen in time. 4. The Ice Maiden of Siberia. Dubbed the Ice Maiden, this 2,500-year-old mummy was found in 1993 in the Russian Altai Mountains, a region that's known for its harsh terrain and remote, frigid conditions. The discovery was nothing short of extraordinary, as the body was so well preserved that it looked almost as if she had just been buried a few years ago, not centuries. The Ice Maiden, also known as the Princess of Ukok, for the plateau where she was found, was likely part of the Scythian people, a group of nomadic warriors who once roamed the Eurasian steppes. She was a young woman, estimated to be in her late 20s at the time of her death, and her body showed signs that she had been a person of importance in her society. Researchers were able to determine that she had been buried with a lot of incredible artifacts, indicating that she held a high status. Her tomb contained everything from ornate gold jewelry to fine textiles and weapons. These items offered crucial insights into the lifestyle of the Scythians, revealing that they were not just warriors, but also skilled craftsmen and traders. Among the most interesting pieces were golden plaques, intricately decorated with images of animals, reflecting the Scythians' deep connection to their environment. What made these finds even more exciting was the presence of tattoos on the Ice Maiden's body, the first known example of tattooed mummified skin in this region. These tattoos were mostly geometric shapes and animal motifs, which are believed to have had spiritual or cultural significance, possibly tied to her role in Scythian religious practices. But it wasn't just the items that were interesting, it was the way the body itself was preserved. The frozen ground of the Altai Mountains acted as a natural freezer, slowing the decomposition process to an almost miraculous extent. The Ice Maiden's skin, hair, and even her fingernails were remarkably intact. Her body was in such good condition that scientists could even analyze traces of her last meal. She had eaten a rich diet that included meat and dairy, which was typical of the Scythian nomadic lifestyle. The circumstances of her death remain unclear, but some theories suggest she may have died during a ritual or ceremonial event. The placement of her grave and the grave goods point to her having been someone of great significance in Scythian society, possibly a priestess, or even a leader among her people. What is clear is that her death was a carefully orchestrated event, and her burial was designed to honor her elevated status. Unlike many other ancient cultures, the Scythians seem to have placed considerable importance on their women, as evidenced by the numerous warrior queens and noble women that have been unearthed in the region. And with his discovery, we have been able to find out more about the region and the people who lived here than ever before. And 5. The Holdremos woman. In 1950, a discovery was made in the marshes of Jutland, Denmark, when a well-preserved centuries-old body was uncovered. This was a remarkable find, preserved by the unique conditions of the bog, where the combination of water, peat, and cold temperatures created a natural mummification process. Dubbed the Holdremos woman, this ancient corpse was found with a rich array of artifacts and remains that revealed fascinating details about life in the Iron Age, approximately 2,000 years ago. The Holdremos woman's body was found lying in a shallow grave, her limbs carefully positioned and surrounded by rich offerings, suggesting she had been deliberately placed in the bog, possibly as part of a ritual or sacrifice. Unlike many other bog bodies, which tend to be fragmentary or decayed, the Holdremos woman's body was exceptionally well preserved. Her skin, hair, and even some of her clothes were still intact, thanks to the anaerobic environment of the bog that slowed the decomposition process. The preservation was so extraordinary that scientists could study her physical appearance, including her facial features and hair texture. Radiocarbon dating and anatomical analysis suggest she was likely in her early 30s when she died, and the cause of her death appears to have been violent. The body showed signs of trauma, particularly to the neck, indicating that she may have been strangled, perhaps as part of a ritualistic sacrifice, or as a punishment for some transgression. Her position in the bog, half sunken, facing down, suggests that the placement of her body was not accidental, but rather part of an intentional symbolic act. 6. Fossilized footprints in New Mexico. In 2009, a team of archaeologists uncovered fossilized human footprints in the mudflats near White Sands National Park in New Mexico. The footprints, preserved in the mud of a now dry lake bed, belonged to both adults and children, suggesting a group of people walking together. Some of the footprints measured 10 to 12 inches long, giving us a sense of the size of the group that once passed through the area. What makes this discovery so exciting isn't just the footprints themselves, but how they challenge previous ideas about when humans first arrived in the Americas. Radiocarbon dating of seeds found nearby placed the footprints at around 23,000 years ago, which is about 10,000 years earlier than most researchers believed people entered the continent. This new evidence suggests that the first humans may have arrived much earlier than we thought, and perhaps crossed the Bering Land Bridge before 13,000 years ago, as previously believed. For years, scientists thought that the first humans reached the Americas around 13,000 years ago, after the last ice age. But these footprints force us to reconsider that timeline, suggesting humans may have crossed the land bridge earlier and spread throughout the continent much sooner. The footprints are also incredible because they offer a direct look at the lives of these early people. The prints are so well preserved that we can see the shape of each footstep, including the arch and the drag of the toes, suggesting they were walking naturally. Some tracks even show signs of movement over time, indicating the group may have been traveling across a muddy plain, likely in search of food or water. By studying the footprints, researchers are learning more about how these people lived. The prints were found in what was once a large, shallow lake, an environment that would have supported a variety of plants, animals, and water sources. The presence of both adult and child footprints suggests that the group was close-knit, with both adults and children traveling together. Alongside the human tracks, the site also contained footprints from animals like mastodons, camels, and giant ground sloths. These tracks help researchers understand the ecosystem that these early humans lived in and how they might have interacted with the animals around them. Were they hunting the animals or just coexisting in the same environment? If we didn't know about this part of history, chances are there's a lot more we've been missing. 7. Toland Man. In 1950, a family of farmers working in a remote peat bog in Denmark made an unexpected discovery that would stun the world. As they dug into the rich, soggy earth, one of the farmers hit something hard. He was irritated at first, assuming it was just a rock or debris in the peat, but his wife urged him to be careful, saying it could be something interesting. As they unearthed it, they were shocked to find a human corpse. The body was clearly male, and apart from a leather cap and belt, he was stark naked. Even more concerning, a noose was tightly wrapped around his neck. At first glance, the state of the body made the farmers believe it was a recently deceased person. They called the police. The officers suspected a murder case, but quickly realized the crime was not one they could investigate in the usual way. The body had clearly been dead for far longer than a few days, and as the police noted, this was a very cold case, literally. They advised the farmers to call in an archaeologist instead. The body was carefully transported to the capital, Copenhagen, where experts at the National Museum of Denmark took over the investigation. To their amazement, they confirmed that the man had indeed been murdered, hanged, with a noose around his neck. But this wasn't the case of a modern crime. After further analysis, they determined that the body dated back over 2,400 years. This was not a recent death, it was a bog body, a naturally preserved mummy from the distant past, preserved in the peat bogs of northern Europe. The cold, acidic conditions of the bog had preserved the man's body, keeping it frozen in time, even preserving his hair, skin, and facial features. He was buried in a way that he'd be lost to time, and we bet his murderers thought no one would ever find him, but there he is, in his glory, and no one can deny his existence, or what happened to him. 8. Croghan Man. In 2003, archaeologists uncovered a body in County Offaly, Ireland, that would go on to change our understanding of ancient burial rituals. Known as Croghan Man, the body was fully preserved in a bog. When Croghan Man was found, the initial surprise came from the level of preservation. His body was so well preserved that experts could see that he had neat, well-manicured nails, suggesting he took care of his appearance. This detail alone set him apart from other ancient remains, where such delicate grooming was rare. But the surprises didn't end there. His body, which had been preserved by the bog's cold, acidic conditions, also revealed a striking leather-plated armlet, an artifact that suggested he might have had a higher status, or even been a warrior. Croghan Man's body was found in a stretch of bogland near Croghan Hill, and it didn't take long for experts to determine that he had been subjected to violent and ritualistic death. Like many other bog bodies, the cause of his death appeared to be hanging. However, he wasn't just thrown into the bog after his death. His body had been carefully positioned in a way suggesting a purposeful, ritualistic disposal. The armlet and nails offered clues into his social status, pointing to the possibility that he was a member of a more elite class or even a warrior. It's possible he was a human sacrifice, executed as part of a spiritual or religious ritual, a common practice in ancient European cultures. Researchers were able to confirm that Croghan Man had been dead for over 2,300 years, placing his life in the late Iron Age. In addition to the body's preservation, scientists studied his stomach contents and discovered that his last meal consisted of grains, oats, and other plant-based foods, a diet typical for people of his status at the time. What was even more interesting was that Croghan Man's body had been carefully treated after death. His face was still quite recognizable, and his hair had been carefully arranged, which further supported the theory that his death was a carefully orchestrated event, not the result of a random or accidental death. Today, Krogan man's remains are housed at the National Museum of Ireland, where researchers are still working on finding the truth about him, one that could explain the circumstances around his death. 9. The Yana rhinoceros carcass. In 2015, scientists made a groundbreaking discovery in the Siberian permafrost that would leave many shocked. A near-perfectly preserved carcass of a woolly rhinoceros, an animal that roamed the earth tens of thousands of years ago before going extinct. The carcass, found in the Abiysky district of Yakutia, Russia, was approximately 80% intact and had been frozen in the permafrost for up to 50,000 years. The woolly rhinoceros, a giant mammal that lived during the Pleistocene epoch, was an iconic creature of the Ice Age, known for its thick fur and massive horns. This particular find was even more extraordinary because it was located near the site where a baby woolly rhino named Sasha was unearthed in 2014. One of the most fascinating aspects of this particular woolly rhino carcass is the preservation of its internal organs, including part of its last meal. This remarkable condition gives scientists an unparalleled opportunity to study the diet and lifestyle of the animal, and what the world looked like during the last ice age. As research continues, the carcass will likely lead to even more discoveries. The only question is, can we really keep up? If you had the chance to, which one of these ancient finds would you want to see face to face?